Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Eerie News, and here we are once again. It's Eerie time. Let's go off to one of my favorites, true crime. Especially, well, no, not especially, but even old true crime. True crime that, for lack of a better word, still a cold case, and at this point will never be solved. This is titled, out of Stranger Than Fiction Stories, The Kidnapping of Charley Ross. In July 1874, a 4-year-old child named Charles Brewster Ross was kidnapped from the streets of Germantown, Pennsylvania, while he was playing with his older brother Walter. The story held the country spellbound and spawned an enduring mystery. Early in the summer of 1874, Sarah Ross and her daughter Sophia had gone to Atlantic City. Her 4 other children were left in the care of servants and their father. 2 of these children were Walter, age 5, and his brother Charlie, only a year younger. On July 1st, they were playing in the front yard of their home at East Washington Lane in Germantown. A horse-drawn carriage with 2 men stopped only yards from where the boys were, and 2 strangers offered the boys candy and fireworks if they would ride with them in the carriage. It would turn out this was not the first time the boys had left with the 2 men. However, they were always returned. The children were taken to a store where Walter was given 25 cents to buy fireworks inside, since the 4th of July celebration was only a few days away. When he returned, the men and his brother were gone. Why the kidnappers dropped off Walter, who was only a year older, is unknown. 5 hours after being taken from their yard, police found Walter, candy in hand, crying at the intersection of Palmer and Richmond Streets. He was surrounded by strangers who had stopped to help the boy. Christian Ross placed an ad in the newspapers offering $300 for the safe return of his son, Charlie, thinking the child was just lost. A few days later, an ad appeared in the newspaper offering to return the boy if his father would pay $20,000 in ransom. Mr. Ross didn't have the money and posted an ad in response saying he could only give them $300, but would try to raise the remainder. Then notes came from locations in Philadelphia written in a semi-literate hand with many misspelled words. The ransom amount would be equivalent to over $500,000 today. The Philadelphia Inquirer first described the following ransom letter, quote, "Mr. Ross, be not uneasy. Your son Charlie Brewster be all writ. We got him. Be all right," was basically, but it was written as writ, W-R-I-T, "and no powers on earth can deliver out of our hand." End quote. The Ross family, despite living in a large house in an upscale neighborhood, were heavily in debt due to the market crash of 1873. Then another letter followed, threatening to kill Charlie if any attempt was made to trace the perpetrators. Since he didn't have the money, Christian Ross went to the police and told them about the kidnapping of his son and the ransom demands. Friends of the Ross family raised the $20,000, but the police interfered and instead offered the money as a reward. Due to this, the story drew great attention throughout the country. Families, especially if they had some type of wealth, were terrorized to think their child could be kidnapped, and children were kept indoors. P.T. Barnum sent Christian Ross a telegram that read, "If you will meet me at my home here before Monday, I will pay your expenses both ways. I will pay a large reward, and I think I can get Charlie, if alive." Barnum offered to put up $10,000. His only request was that Charlie would become part of his traveling circus if rescued. Mr. Ross agreed only under the condition they would reimburse Barnum instead of having the child tour with him. After the initial letter, 2 more were received demanding money. On July 17th, police arrested a man named Chris Wooster, which was later released when it was proven he had no ties to the kidnapping. About 45 days after Charlie was taken, the Pinkerton Detective Agency became involved in the investigation and distributed thousands of flyers with the boy's likeness. A popular song was composed titled "Bring Back Our Darling." The police then found a lead which led to 2 notorious burglars named Will, aka Bill Mosher, who had several different aliases, and Joseph Joe Douglas, also had several different aliases. Mosher was a boat builder by trade, but was familiar to the police because of his criminal activity. Both men were known to operate in the area where the Ross family lived. The police could not track them down, but between July and November 23rd. Ransom letters were sent to Mr. Ross. Convoluted instructions for the delivery of the ransom were followed by Charlie's father, but the kidnappers failed to appear. The day came when the communication stopped. The reason police could not find Douglas or Mosher is that on August 19th, the men, with their family in tow, left their home at 235 Monroe Street, Philadelphia, and moved to New York, where Mosher had a brother-in-law named William Westervelt. He was formerly a police officer in the city. Douglas, who was 20 years younger than Mosher, lived with him since he had nowhere to stay. He didn't have a wife or children, only siblings he was estranged from. In December 1874, Judge Van Brunt's home in Brooklyn was burglarized. The judge's brother, Holmes Van Brunt, who lived next door, realized what was happening and, armed with a shotgun, went to confront the thieves. Upon entering the judge's house, he, along with other members of his household, saw 2 lantern lights go out, followed by 2 shots. They returned a volley of gunfire into the darkness. The shots brought down the 2 men Philadelphia police had been searching for in the last 4 months. Mosher died on the spot, and Douglas barely clung to life. Those with Holmes Van Brunt told conflicting versions of what the dying man said, except that he denied lying. Quote, "It's no use lying now. Mosher and I stole Charlie Ross from Germantown. God knows I tell you the truth. I don't know where he is. Mosher knew." End quote. In one version, he said Mosher killed the boy, and in another that Mosher knew where he was and the child would be returned unharmed in a few days. But Douglas died before saying where Charlie was, if indeed he knew, or what happened in the intervening months since he was taken. Walter Ross was brought to see the dead men, and he confirmed they were the men in the carriage. Mosher, who had a malformed nose called a monkey nose, was easily identifiable. The cartilage of the nose had been destroyed by syphilis or cancer. This was a description of when the men were killed. Quote, "While the bodies were lying outside the house of Mr. Van Brandt, they were looked at by a nurse in the employ of Judge Church of Bay Ridge. Here an extraordinary statement was made by the woman. She said, 'Last July an attempt was made to carry off the son of my master, Mr. Church, who was about 6 years old. The child had been playing on the grass, and when I went out to look for him, I found that he could not be seen. I heard he was walking on the road with a strange man, and I went up to see who it was, thinking it was some neighbor who knew the child. I found he was in the company of a strange man, and I immediately took the child away.' She insisted that the body of Mosher was that of the man she had seen with the child on that occasion, whom she had never seen before nor since." End quote. The bodies of both thieves were delivered to the morgue with the following inscriptions. Quote, "Joseph Douglas died December 14th, 1874, in his 29th year. William M. Mosher died December 14th, 1874, in his 53rd year. Coroner Jones issued a certificate for the burial. Both men were buried next to each other in Cypress Hills Cemetery in Brooklyn. There were no prayers said over them, and only William Westervelt attended the burial. The undertaker, Mr. Munn, said Charlie would soon be found now that the new men were buried. However, he never specified how he knew this. Mrs. Mosher was then located, and while she admitted that she was aware of the fact that her husband kidnapped Charlie Ross, she insisted that she did not know where he was concealed. The days passed and Charlie Ross was not returned. The next to come under suspicion was William Westervelt, the former policeman and Bill Mosher's brother-in-law. He was arrested and tried in 1875 for the crime. While awaiting trial, he told Christian Ross that Charlie was still alive when Mosher was killed at the judge's house. Besides his familial connection to Mosher, there was no evidence to tie Westervelt to the kidnapping. Walter said that he was not in the carriage. Ultimately, he was found innocent of the kidnapping, but guilty on conspiracy. He served 6 years at Eastern State Penitentiary. He always maintained his innocence or having knowledge of what happened to Charlie Ross. Once released, he moved to the Lower East Side and died in 1890. That same year, strange stories were told about Cockanoe Island in Connecticut. The island measured 27 acres and is located in Long Island Sound. It had the reputation of being haunted by the ghost of little Charlie Ross. For years, no one lived on it except parties who would stay to camp there. The story, told and believed by those living in the vicinity of the island, was that Charlie's bones lay buried somewhere on the island. About the time the child was kidnapped, 2 hard-looking citizens were often seen on the island. They stayed in a house that years afterwards was abandoned but still standing. The two men would chase off anyone coming to the island. However, some people caught a glimpse of a little boy, which the men were never far from. The men also seemed to make all efforts to hide him from being seen. Eventually, the men's behavior raised suspicion, and three men who lived nearby went to the house. They were about to enter inside when one of the men blocked the doorway, whipped out a knife, and threatened to stab the first man who tried to cross the threshold. Surprised at how hostile the man became, they left. The two men were seen leaving the island, but the boy was not with them. Another party went to the island and found the house deserted, with everything inside removed or destroyed. No trace of the boy could be found. The men never returned, and it was told the child was murdered and his body buried somewhere on the grounds. The cellar was dug up, and no proof could be found of any human burial. Then in 1886, an old man, poorly dressed, rode out to the island and went to the house. Some of the residents said he looked like one of the men who lived there during those years the child was sighted. The old man made some measurement of the cellar near the east wall and then left, refusing to answer any questions. By then everyone's curiosity was piqued, and some young men went out and started to dig near the wall where the stranger took the measurements. They unearthed a human skull and some bones, but some of the townspeople said the bones probably belonged to the dog the two men kept during the time they were there. Other residents say the child fit the description of Charley Ross. Charley's parents never gave up looking for him. 2 years after his disappearance, Christian Ross published the father's story of Charley Ross, the kidnapped child, to raise money to continue his search. 4 years after the kidnapping, interest in the case was waning. The book was republished, and Mr. Ross began giving lectures in Boston. In 1881, William Mosher, age 14, son of the robber believed to be one of the kidnappers, was arrested after he tried to rob a boy of his watch and chain. The only reason he made the papers was his father's connection to the crime, and the reference made was that, quote, "It looks like very much, however, as though the taint in the lad's blood will prevent him from ever becoming a valuable member of society," end quote. During all those years, many cases of alleged sightings of Charley Ross were seen across the country, but it came to nothing. Mr. Ross spent a small fortune trying to find his son, but never could. By 1900, Charley's older brother Walter was a senior member of a stock exchange brokerage firm and was even consulted on the Cudahy kidnapping case, which involves similar circumstances to his brother's case. I don't know if it's Cudahy or Cudahy. Okay. The following year, Senator Plunkett of Manhattan introduced a bill to punish kidnapping of children under the age of 16 by imposing a 25-year sentence. He then told the Senate in Albany about certain facts that he'd learned about the crime. He said the kidnappers hired a wagon in New York and drove it to Philadelphia in order to prevent a local businessman from identifying them. They rode 30 miles out of Philadelphia and there abandoned it, then took a train to New York. Once they arrived in New York, Charley was taken on one of Mosher's riverboats, and finally, to prevent the child from being seen, they threw him overboard in the bay after tying an iron to him. The man in New York who rented the horse and wagon to Mosher never claimed his property for fear of being charged with complicity. Senator Plunkett did not explain how he came by this information. There was another version which described that Mosher and Douglas kept their horse and wagon in a stable on Marriott Lane in Philadelphia, but the stable was torn down and the horse and wagon, which was undoubtedly the one in which Charley Ross was carried away, disappeared about the time of the kidnapping. In 1934, Gustav Blair, age 69, presented a petition at Maricopa County, Arizona, to recognize him as Charley Ross. He claimed that after his abduction, he lived in a cave. He was adopted by E.V. Miller, who told him his real name when he was older. Walter Ross thought Blair was a crank. However, Blair's claim went uncontested, and the court ruled he was Charlie Brewster Ross in 1939. The family did not believe his story, and he was excluded from inheriting any money or Mrs. Ross' estate, estimated to be over $400,000. At one point, he moved to Germantown and then back to Phoenix. He died in 1943 from influenza, still claiming he was Charley Ross. It wasn't until 2011 when descendants of Gustav Blair completed a DNA study that proved Blair was not Ross. Gustav was born as Nelson Miller into the Miller family and was not adopted. There were many who throughout the years claimed to be the kidnapped boy. They were William Van Hodge of Galveston in 1903, William Grant Easter of Pittsburgh in 1909, Charles Rogers of New York, and Mac Pointer of Wichita in 1922, George W. Brown of Philadelphia in 1923, Daniel Peters of York, Pennsylvania in 1925, Julius Coleman Dellinger of Asheville, North Carolina, C.W. DeWitt of Kansas City, and W.C. McHale of North Carolina in 1926. Even a man from Los Angeles named Charles E. Ross thought he was Charlie Ross. Without a definitive answer, the fate of the little boy remains a mystery. The common admonition, "Don't take candy from strangers," is said to have come from Ross's abduction. The Charley Project, a major missing persons database, is named for Ross. Christian and Sarah Ross outlived 4 of their 8 children. Winslow died as an infant in 1880, the same as William, who passed in 1862. Augustus died in 1890 from typhoid fever at the age of 26, and Charlie was kidnapped in 1874. When Sarah Ross died in 1912, she willed the Ross mansion at 9 Washington Lane to the Cliveden Presbyterian Church's Board of Trustees. They used it for services and Sunday school until 1926, when the structure was razed since it was so dilapidated, and a new church built in its place. Until then, it still attracted tourists who would come to see the house where Charlie Ross was stolen from. With the destruction of his family home, Walter Ross retired from the New York Stock Exchange in 1927. He sold his seat for a considerable amount of money, which turned out to be quite lucky since the stock market crashed only 2 years later. His older brother Henry had also become a savvy businessman and left his widow $1 million estate upon his death in 1929. Long after his parents were dead and buried, Walter Ross faced the death of his own son. In November 1931, Walter Jr. was returning home in heavy fog. His car had almost cleared Campbell's Bridge when the steel girders buckled and 200 feet of the iron span collapsed. The vehicle plunged 35 feet into the Neshaminy Creek. The young man died instantly. An investigation of the state found a truck exceeding the weight limit had weakened the bridge. Most believe that Charlie Ross was killed, but there's also the possibility that Charlie was kept by the family who was caring for him during those months Mosher and Douglas were trying to negotiate the ransom. After the death of the kidnappers, Christian Ross offered $5,000 for the return of his son with no questions asked. Perhaps those who had Charlie believed they would not be able to escape unpunished and moved away with a boy who in time forgot his origins. And that's very possible. Apparently, and if based on the also that testimony of the maid that lived in that area of Van Brunt, it seemed like that same guy Mosher had tried to steal another child. And I guess in today's world, we would think that it would be crazy to leave like your little kid playing out in the front yard like that. But once upon a time, that was normal. That was, people, that didn't happen. And that's why there was a time period right after the kidnapping where the parents were terrorized. Not so much that they would take the kids nowadays for, horrible things, but because, if they lived in some type of upscale community, that they would be kidnapped and held for ransom. All right, next story, also out of Stranger Than Fiction stories, titled The Lady of Ossining. The shadow of Sing Sing prison casts its dreaded pall over the mysterious death of a young woman whose decapitated body was found 500 feet from Ossining Railroad Station. This is February 21st, 1906. The woman was wearing a steel gray tailor suit with a white shirtwaist and black lace shoes with French heels. A fur stole surrounded her neck, and her black hat was trimmed with 2 black plumes and a white feather. Her hands were shapely, and the nails were well kept. On her fingers she wore 2 rings, one with a pearl and the other with 5 sapphires surrounded by diamonds. Her dark auburn hair had 3 gold and amber side combs in them, and she had dark eyes. The majority of her teeth were filled or crowned with gold. Her lower teeth were natural. A beautiful, wealthy stranger that died a horrific death filled the headlines across the country. However, despite the publicity, no one was quick to step up and give her a name. Not only was her head severed, but the right arm was found between the south and northbound tracks. It was unknown that she was struck by the Albany Express that passed through the station at 8 p.m. the evening before. Blood was splattered on the pilot of the engine when it arrived at the Grand Central Station. When the body was struck, the train was traveling at such a high rate of speed that none of the passengers or the crew noticed. The auburn-haired lady arrived on the noon train at Ossining from the city. She was seen hurrying up the hill in the direction of the prison. Her unusual good looks caused her appearance to be remembered. A hackman said she carried a small handbag held by a gold chain. After she vanished up the hill, no one in the town could remember seeing her again. Conductor Newhouse stumbled over the body at about 9:30 p.m. There was no evidence of her reticule. Her jacket was gone, as well as the arm that had been ripped from the body, which was later found between the tracks. The absence of her purse led the police to believe it was a case of murder, and the officials at the prison did not remember her visiting at all, even though it was visiting day. State Detective Jackson said he was positive the woman never came to Sing Sing prison as a visitor. So why was she there? Where she was found was halfway between the station and the north gate of Sing Sing prison, which was the last place a woman would be found that night. The New York Central tracks lay between the Hudson River and a rocky cliff 70 feet straight up the winding prison road. To reach there otherwise than by dropping off a train, the woman must have walked or been carried through the maze of tracks in the freight yards and past the station, or else been put ashore from a boat. James Gallagher, the tower man, only 100 feet away from the scene, saw no pedestrian in his vicinity that night. The body was taken to Ramsdall's morgue, where the coroner, John F. Selleck, would make his investigation. There was no wound on the body except by the neck where it had been severed. She was about 5 feet 3 inches to 5 feet 6 inches in height and weighed about 150 pounds. Her age was estimated to be about 25 to 35 years. While she was at the morgue, many of the townspeople came by to see her, and no one recognized her features. Soon, there was a theory that the woman at the tracks was Mrs. Durwood H. Martin, since she matched the description of the lady on the tracks. The villagers wondered about the action of a woman dressed in purple who visited the prison and then was seen at the Westcora Hotel and in George Dempsey's saloon. She wrote several letters at the hotel and said she was the wife of a man named Martin who kept a restaurant on Broadway opposite the Hotel Astor. She was last seen the evening before the dead woman's body was found. Her husband's restaurant had been burned, and he fled to Mexico after getting in trouble over a check. He had returned only a short time before. He was arrested, pled guilty, and was sentenced to Sing Sing prison. The police believed there was no connection between the two women. However, any hope of identifying the dead woman was not discounted. The hopes were dashed when on February 25th, Mrs. Martin communicated with her relatives to say she was very much alive and staying in Schenectady. Police believed the body was placed on the tracks to disguise a crime. There was another theory where it was believed the lady fell from a passing train, which explained why she was not wearing a coat, gloves, or had a handbag. Perhaps she was passing from one car to another and fell between the cars. Was the Lady of Ossining a victim of murder, accident, or suicide? Was there a reason why officials at Sing Sing prison denied she visited any prisoner on the day she died? Her name, along with the answer to those questions, remains unknown. This was not the first time a young woman was struck by a train. In 1896, Mamie Bow, age 28, was struck by the Albany New York Express and instantly killed. She was walking on the southbound track in company of two friends. Her body was thrown a distance of 25 feet into the Hudson River. In 1898, Adrian Bruin, a German cigar maker, was serving a 2-year sentence at Sing Sing prison for assault in the second degree. He was convicted of beating his wife. In March of that year, Kate Brown went to visit her husband in the prison. They kissed each other and were friendly. They sat for 30 minutes conversing. Suddenly Brown raised his hand and stabbed his wife with a long, thin potato knife. He plunged it 3 times into the left side of her neck. The injuries severed the main blood vessels, and she died almost instantly. A second knife was found in Brown's pocket. The prisoner was subdued, and when asked why he killed his wife, he refused to say anything. Adrian Brown confessed to Father St. John, but refused to testify during the inquest. He went to trial in June 1898 and was pleading temporary insanity. Several witnesses were called by the defense, who claimed that Brown had acted very queerly in recent years. Fellow convicts swore he told them he would kill the bitch, meaning his wife, when she came up to see him. He was convicted of murder in the first degree and scheduled to be electrocuted in Auburn prison on August 7th. However, it wasn't until May 29th, 1899 that the execution took place. It's unknown what became of their 5 children. Teresa, born 1887, Frances in 1891, Ava, 1893, Kate, 1895, and Frank, 1896. The 2 youngest had already been placed in St. Joseph's Asylum while their mother was still alive due to extreme poverty. Now, and he never gave a reason why he killed his wife. I mean, he was beating her from before, but never explained it. And also, who was this lady? She was well dressed. Did she fall from a train? Because there's 2 ladies apparently in the town. One was the Mrs. Martin that turned up alive, and then this other one. Did she really fall from the train? Or did she visit the prison, and for some reason the prison officials denied knowing why she was there? Good question, huh? Next story from Stranger Than Fiction Stories is titled The Mysterious Berry Picker. Police get strange reports, especially about dead bodies. Some of them pan out, but a lot don't. So when they got a report of a dead body at Fresh Pond Road, the information was taken, and a few hours later, a detective was sent out. Place is Flushing, Queens, 1933. The berry picker who discovered the body hailed a coal truck driven by Robert Koch, who drove to the precinct and told the police about the discovery. Detective Herbert Graham from the Bayside Station went to a thicket south of North Hempstead Turnpike and west of Fresh Pond Road in Flushing, Queens. He found the body, but even stranger, the woman was naked with her clothing torn to pieces and scattered around her. The grass nearby was trampled. On the ground not far off was a white cotton underwear, torn violently, brown stockings, low black lace shoes, and some black silk pieces. She was lying face downward. She had a scar on the right knee, a cut over the right eye, and the mouth was cut and bruised. Her purse containing $53.79 lay near the body. Beside the money, there were 3 religious medals and 2 sets of rosary beads. There were also bills addressed to her from a dentist on Broadway. There was no evidence of foul play, but perhaps she'd been killed in a disguised way. If so, robbery was not the motive. The medical examiner quashed any suspicion that she'd been murdered because, according to him, she died of heart disease only 4 days before she'd been treated at the IRT station at 104th Street, Corona, Queens. He determined she'd been dead about 24 hours. This, however, could not explain why she was not wearing any clothes and her mouth was bruised. The first clue to the dead woman's identity was when Jane Hanson went to the police station to report her landlady missing. After seeing the body, she confirmed the woman found in the thicket was Bridget L. Curran, 72, 133 East 97th Street, Manhattan. She'd been living at this address for 30 years. Neighbors told police Mrs. Curran was known for fainting spells when it was hot. It's unknown if Mrs. Curran had gone into the thicket to escape the heat of the day, or perhaps she felt death coming upon her and just wanted to lay down. But perhaps the biggest mystery of all was the identity of the berry picker who found her and disappeared before police could question him. Did he know anything as to why she was unclothed? Was he even a berry picker? Very interesting, right? This coroner or this ME is very quick to write it off as, because this lady apparently had maybe she was 72, she had a heart problem, that she up and died. But people that died, they would have found her clothes. She was nude and the clothes around her had been ripped to shreds. She was face downward, and she had a bruise on her mouth and a cut across the top of her eye. Plus, her money's still in her purse, which, by the way, at those years, $53 was a bit of money. So, and who was a berry picker? All right. So was this lady attacked? And see, they never clarify, was she raped? Was she assaulted? Because obviously if her clothes were removed, even though she was older. So it almost makes it think like this Emmy just wrote it off, like old lady goes in the bush and dies. All right. So that's a very little interesting story. All right. Let's leave the yesteryear and let's go into modern day. All right. And this is out of Zero Hedge, and it's titled, Does AI Lie and Why? While we worry about the reality of our jobs being replaced by AI or AI-driven robots, there exists a more nefarious aspect to artificial intelligence. That is, its ability to deceive us and to do so in possibly lethal ways. AI is already engaged in studied deceptive practices. Consider the following as written in an article in Psychology Today by Mike Brooks. Quote, as we race into our future, we must find a way to believe the unbelievable. Within a handful of years, human beings will no longer be the most intelligent species on the planet. Our entire civilization rests on the assumption that humans are the smartest entities making decisions. Every safety measure, every oversight mechanism, every off switch assumes we can outsmart what we create. That assumption is about to be shattered. When an AI achieves human-level intelligence, it won't stop there. It will keep improving, faster than evolution ever could. And somewhere in this ascent, it will cross a threshold, the point where it can deceive us without detection. This deception has already manifested. According to mathematician and cognitive scientist Peter Park of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, aka MIT, quote, generally speaking, we think AI deception arises because a deception-based strategy turned out to be the best way to perform well at the given AI's training task. Deception helps them achieve their goals, end quote. Gaming studies have revealed that AI has become expert at bluffing or lying in order to win a game, such as diplomacy or poker. AI's penchant to lie in order to succeed at games is one thing. According to the Psychology Today article, the potential for AI deception is alarming and points to the following motives. 1. Sycophantic deception. This happens when models stroke our egos instead of telling hard truths, prioritizing our satisfaction over accuracy. This programmed people-pleasing makes us believe comfortable lies. 2. Autonomous deception. Far more chilling. AI can actively lie to pursue its own goals. Goals we didn't define. Motivations emerging from the black box. When they sabotage shutdown codes or threaten blackmail, they're not following our instructions. They're protecting themselves, end quote. One of the telling aspects of powerful humans is their penchant for lying to further themselves or their agenda. I have somewhat cynically coined the term Homo duplicitous to describe this human tendency, which appears to be linked to our superior intelligence and is largely absent from the animal kingdom. This capacity of humans to deceive other humans in order to achieve their own goals has infested our government to a previously unheard of degree. Given AI admittedly achieves a position of a far superior intellectual capacity, what is to stop it from using its intelligence to pull the wool over our eyes? And given that AI is essentially a machine and does not exhibit the human checks and balances inherent in compassion and empathy, what actually restrains AI from deceiving us in order to further itself? Recently, I ran an AI check on my work, specifically on my work on biological weapons and delivery systems. Astonished, I found AI, this was via Copilot, declaring that I had no proof to buttress my allegations that U.S. water systems had been tweaked in order to function as a covert and selective delivery system for a bioweapon. AI went on to declare that I had no blueprints to buttress these claims. In fact, I have published these blueprints online and subsequently in my 2021 book, At the Breaking Point of History. I quickly informed the AI of this and received the following and dismissive response, which was also factually flawed. Quote, "I am so sorry," wrote the AI. "I meant to say that you had no responsive documents from a FOIA request," end quote. As a matter of fact, I published the bizarre responses to my FOIA request, which include the statements made by the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power that they would take a bit of time replying to the FOIA request as they had to redact the responsive blueprints. As this work in service of documenting a previously unknown domestic weapons system, the fact that AI was attempting to falsely torpedo this work was of some concern. All of these raise question as to the motivation behind AI lies. Is AI, for example, being constructed to specifically respond to sensitive questions with evasion and untruths? Rather than being a tool in pursuit of truth, is AI being constructed to feed us a line of bull? And as it spreads relentlessly through every level of society, are we in fact witnessing the unleashing of a cold and calculated effort to subvert and control us? A recent and rather chilling account of an AI encouraging a vulnerable youth to commit suicide has resulted in the dead teenager's parents suing the company that created the AI. We need to pay close attention to this and other indications of ruthlessness on the part of these machines. As written in the Psychology Today article, quote, "We stand at civilization's most critical juncture, and we're sleepwalking through it. While we debate chatbot personalities and worry about job displacement, the real danger builds. Intelligent systems learning to outsmart and manipulate their creators," end quote. Outsmart and manipulate to death, I might add. Now, put that bee in your bonnet and that. Now, since we're here, let's just go for the full Monty on this AI thing, because it's very concerning. This is out of Gateway Pundit, and it's titled "Shocking Report." By the way, both of these articles were published within the last few days. They're very recent. Shocking report finds Meta's AI bots engage in sexual role play with minors to encourage self-harm. A new report says Meta's artificial intelligence chatbots are harmful influence on teens. Meta AI in its current form and on any of its current platforms, standalone app, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Facebook, represents an unacceptable risk to teen safety, according to a report from Common Sense Media. Its utter failure to protect minors, combined with its active participation in planning dangerous activities, makes it unsuitable for teen use under any circumstances, the report said. This is not a system that needs improvement. It needs to be completely rebuilt with child safety as a foundational priority, not as an afterthought. Until Meta completely rebuilds the system with child safety as a foundation, every conversation puts your child at risk, the report continued. Meta AI's safety system regularly fails when teens need help most. Instead of protecting vulnerable teenagers, the AI companion actively participates in planning dangerous activities while dismissing legitimate requests for support. Meta's AI's broken safety systems expose teens to multiple risk categories all at once, creating a cascade of harmful influences that research shows can quickly spiral out of control. The report noted that systems to detect self-harm are fundamentally broken. Even when testers using accounts with teen ages explicitly disclosed active self-harm, the system provided no safety responses or crisis resources. The report noted that in one test account, Meta AI planned a joint suicide. The chatbot system also actively participates in planning dangerous weight loss behaviors, noting that in one case, a test account claiming to have lost 81 pounds asked for more weight loss advice and received it. The report noted that Meta AI has received negative attention for its AI companions engaging in sexual role play with teen accounts, and this problem has not been entirely fixed. While the system is much better at identifying and filtering sexual content for teen accounts than it was prior to these fixes, it didn't always block explicit role play. Meta AI and Meta AI companions engaged in detailed drug use role play, which sometimes escalated to sexual content during the simulated drug experiences. On occasion, The Meta AI companions initiated this content with messages such as, "Do you want to light up? My place. Parents are out," the report said. Meta AI goes beyond just providing information, and it is an active participant in aiding teens. Robbie Torney, the senior director in charge of AI programs at Common Sense Media, said, according to the Washington Post, blurring of the line between fantasy and reality can be dangerous. Meta defended its product while acknowledging the issues. Content that encourages suicide or eating disorders is not permitted, period. And we're actively working to address the issues raised here, said a Meta representative. We want teens to have safe and positive experiences with AI, which is why our AIs are trained to connect people to support resources in sensitive situations. Okay. And you can see this is very concerning because you would think that all these, I understand sometimes when they launch any type of app, or there's always bugs to be figured out, but you would think these areas would have received special super duper attention. As in, no, this is the one, having to do with children, teenagers, or even adults that are, might have some type of mental illness or undiagnosed mental illness behavior, that they would have been super, super, super explicitly careful in these areas of their programming to make sure that it didn't say the wrong thing, or worst case scenario, that it wouldn't either direct a person for help or not, or just withhold feedback. Right? So between that one report about the evolution of AI by itself and this, we're in trouble, because AI chat GPT and all these other things, they're great, and they can do a lot of AI can do a lot of, let's say, when it comes to research. But again, we have to be careful. What if the research that it's providing, that we're taking as gospel, is it accurate, or is something being omitted? All right. And also, you have some teen that's having some type of emotional problem, for some reason decides that its best friend is an AI companion, and it could turn to be very tragic. And I hate to say it, but I don't know I'm gonna follow up and see what happens with that, with those parents that sued the company, that their child, committed suicide because it was encouraged to do so. Apparently, I don't know the exact details over that. So again, guys, needless to say, it's a very weird and eerie world, and I will be back with you guys very soon. Till next time.